best place to get a lot more detail on the question papers is at that link that I posted in the meeting chat. So that link in the meeting chat has the direct link to a video all about question papers. So since I talked about it already in class, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail right now.
Okay.
But here in Canvas, am I sharing my screen? Yep. So here is the question paper resources area. So here you can find the rubric and template, and actually the video link is here as well. So you can open up that and see the link. And then I have my example question paper. So these three resources are probably the most important for reviewing what to do for a question paper, these three right here. So the question paper instructions, let's open that really quick. All right, so this basically describes how to write a question paper. The main things are figuring out a question that you're interested in. So figure out a question that you're interested in, touching on one of the topics that we've covered in class. So maybe you're really interested in parenting styles and how maybe parenting styles are related to child temperaments, how parenting styles are related to autism, how parenting styles are related to abuse, something like that. You might be interested in that question. So then, after you've picked your question, you can go and search for peer-reviewed research. So how we do that is two ways. Oh, that's the wrong library. Salt Lake Community College Library. That's what I want. So again, this is really brief. Go into the video for more detail. You go to our library and you can go to Research Databases. And here you will look for at least 2 peer-reviewed research journal sources. So I recommend PsycInfo and Google Scholar for most of the topics. So to get to PsycInfo, you go down here, push on P, and then scroll down, you'll find PsycInfo. So PsycInfo covers most psych journals from 1887 all the way to now. If there's something that's been published in the last 6 months to a year, it might not be up there yet. But generally they have the newest stuff. Looks like Google Scholar isn't actually listed here anymore. That's annoying. So let's just go Google Scholar. All right, so Google Scholar is another place you can search for peer-reviewed research. So let's say we wanted parenting styles, let's say, and autism. Maybe that's what we're interested in. So here we can use these things to narrow down and find a full text journal article, like maybe this one, for example. This was from the Iranian Journal of Psychiatry. So I would probably check to make sure that that is a peer-reviewed journal, just to go to their website, search, see if it's peer-reviewed. They should say if they have a peer review process. But then you skim through the abstract and the intro and then the discussion of this paper, and hopefully with this paper you're able to answer part of your question. So find 2 papers like that as sources, and then you can use one web source. So a place that you might find a web source is American Psychology Association. So here, APA has a lot of reports where they bring together a lot of research and kind of write short papers on it, very similar to your question papers, actually. So we might search here, parenting styles, autism. So you search for your keywords. This one didn't find, but you might be able to find style. Might be able to find it better if you can spell it correctly as well. So here you can look through some of their resources. They have links to journal articles or magazine articles. Let's say we want something that's less research intensive and just kind of reporting in normal language. I might go with a magazine article. Tenure track parenting. That's hopefully going to be relevant to me sometime. I'll just open one of these as an example. So this is not a journal article research journal, but it might have relevant information to help you answer your question. Generally, these kinds of magazine articles or something will be written more in a language for everybody, rather than the research journals have like statistics or talking about previous research. They're a little I mean, at your level, these are some of the first research articles you're reading. So they might seem a little difficult for this first question paper to read through that abstract intro and discussion. But as you read through them, you'll be able to understand a lot of it, probably a lot more than you expect right now. And then as you do that more and more throughout your careers, looking at research, you'll be able to understand everything really easily in those. So right now, for the research articles themselves, don't worry about the methods in them. Don't worry about the results. Like this is an abstract kind of summarizing all those. But as you read through the article, here's the intro. So you can see it comes to here. Then we get to methods. Ignore that. At your level, ignore the methods and results. Methods say this is the kind of study we did. Data analysis and results is the stats, what they found. And then after that comes the discussion. We're back in plain words or more plain words. They describe these are the findings. This is why it's relevant. So you'll find two sources like that are research articles, and at least two of those. And you need 3 total sources. So your third source might be something like this, a magazine article from APA or WebMD, something that's a valid source. So a blog that your cousin posted might not be unless they're actually a researcher in the field that does work on this kind of stuff. And then to actually write it, let's look back at the example question paper here. So you'll write it in APA format, Times New Roman, double spaced. You'll have in-text citations like this. So this says that essentially the facts that I say in this sentence, that Ritalin is a fast-acting drug, adults using the drug need to carefully monitor when they last took the dose. So all of those facts came from this research article, this Greenberg article, and it had no date. Then this one, Ritalin influences neurotransmitters in the brain, including dopamine and norepinephrine. So that article, Gottlieb 2001, it talked about that. That's not a direct quote from it, but it talked about it, and then I paraphrased some of the findings or maybe even a whole paragraph into that sentence that I wrote myself. But the data, the information came from this source. So this example paper is basically what yours should look like, about 2 pages long with 1 page of references. Again, you need 3 references, 2 need to be your peer-reviewed journal article. Yeah, so I know that's really brief, but hopefully that answers some of the questions you have. And if not, I'd say go to the YouTube video. But do you have any questions right now that you can ask during class?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, definitely use that link that I posted in the meeting chat. It's also in your Canvas right here. The link is there. So go and watch that for a bigger breakdown, especially on how to search for research articles. That's a lot of what I just skimmed over right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So any other questions or logistical things from anyone? As a reminder, your first question paper will be due in a couple weeks now, a little more than 2 weeks. All right. Well, let's see how many students we've got here right now. We've got most of the class. It looks like a few members of the class are not here. I'll try to invite them. Maybe they're not able to log in. So what we'll do now is a quick review on the parenting styles, and then we've got an activity where it's kind of a parenting styles quiz, a little video of clips from shows and movies, and you've got to determine what kind of parenting style the parents in those videos had. So authoritarian parenting is high in demandingness but low on warmth. So you might hear things like it's my way or the highway, firm limits and controls, not a lot of exchange between the parent and child to explain like this is why the rules exist, those kinds of things. Authoritative parenting is generally seen as the most positive. It's both warm as well as high in demand, so there's structure. But if the child asks, well, why do I have to wear pants today? There's a back and forth between the parent and the child, especially at an early childhood level. That's probably a discussion that would be happening, versus an adolescent might be asking something like, well, why do I have a curfew? I think my curfew should be pushed back later, or something like that. And in an authoritative parenting style, there would be back and forth discussion, still supportive of the child, being able to listen to the child, as well as having those that structure. Uninvolved or neglectful parenting is low in demandingness as well as low in warmth. So in this kind of situation, the parent is kind of out of the picture. They might not even be present. If they are present in the home, they aren't involved in the child's life. They might not care about grades or what the child is doing. And so this is different than permissive, which as well has very low demandingness, very low structure, very low rules, but very high in warmth. So you might say this parent's trying to be the best friend of their children. So that's a quick and brief example of each of these parenting styles. So hopefully that refreshes your memory from the end of lecture last time, and we will jump into our activity. For this activity, first as a class right here in this main classroom, we'll watch examples of 3 different parenting styles, so clips, so all together, and then you'll move off to your small group teams and discuss which parenting style you thought you saw in number 1, number 2, and number 3. So as a reminder, how to get to those teams, click over here or wherever it is on your app, and then jump in the group that corresponds to your last name. So QR. So mine would be Q to Z because my last name starts with R, so I would jump into that group. If it ends up being that there are only, say, 2 people in your group, maybe just jump into one of the other groups. We definitely want at least 3 people to be discussing what these kinds of parenting styles are. So questions about what we're doing right now? We're going to watch a video together and then jump into groups and discuss. So maybe take some notes as you watch the video of pieces of evidence that you saw that might suggest it's authoritative or uninvolved or permissive or authoritarian. You might also know these movies and be able, or shows, and be able to cite additional evidence that we don't see in these specific clips, and that would be fine too. I think that's really useful for these discussions. All right, is everybody ready? Then I will get those clips up.
Will, I'm glad you're here. Some business came up I got to handle. So we're going to have to put our trip on hold. You understand?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Just for a couple of weeks.
I understand.
Yeah. Maybe a little longer.
Yeah, whatever.
Look, I'll call you next week and we'll iron out the details. Okay?
Yeah.
It was great seeing you, son.
You too, Lou.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Will.
You know what? Actually, this works out better for me. You know, the Slimmies of summer come to class wearing next to nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's all right to be angry.
Hey, why should I be mad? I'm saying at least he said goodbye this time. I just wish I hadn't wasted my money buying this stupid present.
I'm sorry. If there was something that I
Hey,
could
you know
do-
what? You ain't got to do nothing, Uncle Phil. Hey, ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm gonna be sitting up every night asking my mom, when's daddy coming home, you know? Who needs him? Hey, he wasn't there to teach me how to shoot my first basket, but I learned, didn't I? Hey, I got pretty damn good at it too, didn't I,
Yeah,
Uncle Phil?
you did.
Got through my first date without him, right? I learned how to drive. I learned how to shave. I learned how to fight without him. I had 14 great birthdays without him. He never even sent me a damn card. To hell with him! I ain't need him then, and I don't need him now.
Will.
Nah, you know what, Uncle Phil? I'm gonna get through college without him. I'm gonna get a great job without him. I'm gonna marry me a beautiful honey, and I'm gonna have me a whole bunch of kids. I'm gonna be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as hell don't need him for that, because ain't a damn thing he could ever teach me about how to love my kids. How come he don't want me, man?
So that was the first example. So we even get 2 examples of parenting from that one. So maybe write a couple notes, which parenting styles you thought they were, that you saw there. And then in a minute, we'll move into the small groups and discuss it. So I'll give you like 15 seconds to write some things down, and then we'll do the next video. All right, so let's do the next video.
I'm the princess. I'm the example. I've got duties, responsibilities, expectations. My whole life is planned out, preparing for the day I become, well, my mother. She's in charge of every single day of my life. Aye, Robin, jolly Robin, and thou shalt know of my project. And thou shalt know of mine.
Enunciate, you must be understood from anywhere in the room, or it's all for naught.
This is all for naught.
I heard that. From the top. A princess must be knowledgeable about her kingdom. She doesn't doodle. That's a C, dear. A princess does not be chortled. Doesn't stuff her gob. Rises early, is compassionate, patient, cautious, clean, and above all, a princess strives for, well, perfection. But everyone.
All right, so what kind of parenting style did you think you saw there? Maybe write it down, a couple pieces of evidence, and then I'll give you about 15 seconds and we'll start the next one. All right, so let's watch the next example.
Wow, your house is really nice. I know, right? I'm home. Hey, Kylie. Hey. Hey, how are my best girlfriends? Hey, Mrs. George. This is Katie. Hello, sweetheart. Hi. Welcome to our home. Just want you to know, if you need anything, don't be shy, okay? There are no rules in this house. I'm not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom. Right, Regina? Please stop talking. Okay. I'm gonna make you girls a hump day treat.
This is your room? It was my parents' room, but I made them trade me.
You guys, happy hour is from 4 to 6.
Is there alcohol in this?
Oh, God, honey, no. What kind of mother do you think I am? Why do you want a little bit? Because if you're gonna drink, I'd rather you do it in the house.
No, thank you.
So, you guys, what is the 411? What has everybody been up to? What is the hot gossip? Tell me everything. What are you guys listening to? What's the cool jams?
Mom, could you go fix your hair?
Okay. You girls keep me young. Oh, I love you so much.
All right, so what parenting style did you think that was? I'll give you a couple. Actually, as you write your notes, let's also move into our small groups. There is one other example in this video, but it's it's not really as clear as some of these other ones. I think they were trying to go, never mind, we'll talk about it after. So let's move into teams and then discuss for probably 5 or 10 minutes. Let's be back in the general group meeting at 8. Let's say at 9. Let's be back in the general group meeting. As a reminder, to get to your small groups, jump into one of these that corresponds with your last name. So again, mine would be this group. If you find that there are only 2 people in your group or something like that, just jump into another group so you can have a bigger group discussion. So hopefully at least 3 people per group would be great. So talk about which parenting styles you thought were examples 1, 2, and 3, and I'll come through the different groups and see how everyone's doing. All right, as everybody is filing back into this room, we'll talk about the different examples. So it looks like there's still a couple people coming back in, but we've got most of us. I think that might just be one group. I'll go talk to them and try to invite them back in. Well, as I went to invite them back in, they all closed that meeting and jumped back in. So good. All right, well, let's get some input from anybody. So what were the parenting styles that we saw in the very first example from Will Smith? And what's that? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I can't believe I almost didn't remember that. All right, go for it, Marina.
In my opinion, with Will and his father, it was a neglectful or uninvolved parenting because he kept blowing him off and not taking any responsibility for him.
Yeah, very good. Did anybody have any disagreements with that? Thought that the parenting style of Will's biological father was anything other than uninvolved or neglectful? Yeah, all right. So we've got a comment that says Uncle Phil, his actual father figure throughout the show. So again, with this, we didn't actually see much from Uncle Phil there, but we did see him being warm and supportive. But the comment here, we've got Uncle Phil was authoritative through the whole series. So if you've watched it, you would know, you would have some more examples of that. So did anybody else come to that conclusion with Uncle Phil? Or a different conclusion as well? Probably a different conclusion would be more interesting to talk about. All right. Yeah, I think that one was pretty clear that we had neglectful or uninvolved from Will's biological father, and then authoritative from the actual father figure throughout the show, Uncle Phil. So really great work there. The next one can be a little bit more tricky. So we have the movie Brave with Merida's mother, the Queen there. Did anybody have some disagreements in their group about what that one parenting style was that would like to share?
Our group decided I was authoritarian because she was very demanding of her daughter, even though her daughter didn't want to do much, apparently. I haven't watched the movie, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But seems like she wants like the perfect daughter. She wants her to be the perfect princess. So
Yeah.
that's what she got it from it.
Yep, exactly. And it looks like another group also decided that the Queen goes from authoritarian in the beginning to authoritative by the end. So again, authoritarian, just like you were saying, is high in demandingness, but low on warmth and low on that back and forth. We didn't see any of that from that clip. And then I think that obviously we didn't see the entire movie, didn't see to the end. Not everybody's seen the movie, but I would say that she does a better job of shifting towards authoritative by the end through all their challenges and adventures that they have there. So good. Anyone else come up with a different thing from our clip than authoritarian? Or are all of the groups in agreement on that one? All right, well, good. All right, so for the third one, from Mean Girls, I don't even remember the characters' names, the Mean Girls mom. Go for it, Brooke.
So I think this one is obviously permissive. I mean, she basically wanted to be her kids' friends, and there was no demands except for like, hey, be my friend. And then in our group, we talked about how when we were younger, we all wanted parents that were permissive, but like once we like grew up, we all realized how weird that is and how we don't want that.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad that you went beyond just the discussion of that one single example to what you wanted from parents as you were growing up, to now realizing that having some of those demands as well as that warmth were probably a good thing. So yeah, really great. Did anyone disagree? I think that one's probably the most, maybe not the most obvious, because the uninvolved and neglectful example is pretty obvious as well. But yeah, permissive for sure. And so each of these, I mean, the ones from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, those are fairly accurate to what you might actually see in life. I mean, obviously Mean Girls, it's a comedy movie. They're kind of going over the top with it. There definitely could be parents that permissive and that over the top. That's for sure. But I do think each of these kind of shows some extremes of these parenting styles. So hopefully that helps give you a sense of authoritative, authoritarian, uninvolved, and permissive parenting beyond just the examples we talked about in class, the examples that other students brought up. So hopefully you remember some of those examples as well. The last clip in that video, actually, I think it's trying to get at authoritative, but the parents are actually being, in that instance, very authoritarian. So it's not the greatest example for this kind of activity. But thank you all for doing that and working in your groups. Seems like everybody's got a lot clearer picture of these parenting styles. There will be a couple questions on your exam with some scenarios and ask you, so what kind of parenting style is this? It'll give you kind of a situation. So hopefully that makes it a little more clear now. All right, so let's take a quick break, and then we will talk a little bit more about family and in early childhood. We'll start with punishment. We'll go over one of the least fun topics with abuse, and then we'll continue on and talk about some other socio-emotional development and play in early childhood. So let's take a quick break and be back at like 9:12, even though that's pretty short. Just give you a chance to maybe get a snack or use the restroom. So we'll be back at about 9:12. All right, let's get back to it. So think about parenting styles and think about how they might be related to things like attachment styles, child temperaments, things like that. I think we'll actually move forward from this question to make sure that we get through the rest of the chapter today so that we don't have to extend that out. But do think about that because, well, maybe just one quick question. Which kind of attachment style do you think is going to be most closely related to the neglectful parenting that we saw in that first example with Will Smith and his biological father? What kind of attachment do you think you would have to that parent? So maybe just in the chat, put what you think it might be. So for a neglectful parenting style, what kind of attachment do you think the child might have? So we've got a comment of insecure and a comment of avoidant. I'll put those both together and say insecure avoidant. I think that's probably a pretty good guess there. I think also in the specific case of Will's biological father there, we would probably see there might not be any kind of attachment style. There might be zero attachment at all because the parent is so uninvolved that they don't actually feel any kind of attachment. But yeah, insecure, depending on the specific behaviors, many kinds of insecure might come from that, but insecure avoidant would definitely be a very, very probable one for sure. All right, what about for authoritative parenting style? So the one that it's both high in warmth and high in demands and structure. What kind of attachment style do you think that might be more likely to foster? All right, we've got a comment in the chat of securely attached. Yep, and that's actually what we see play out in the research as well. Some of the most common attachment styles with with the parenting style of authoritative, we generally see a higher probability or a higher incidence or likelihood of a secure attachment there. So yeah, again, this goes back to depends on ethnicity, depends on culture as well. So it's not 100% every single person. You can definitely have a securely attached necessarily authoritative parent. You can also have an insecure attachment to a parent that's authoritative as well. Just on average, that's usually what we see. All right, so let's talk about some of the least fun things to talk about as we're talking about early childhood. Both as well as abuse. So punishment includes physical, verbal, and also emotional. So punishment generally tends to instill fear, rage, or avoidance of a parent. Also, punishing tends to model out of control behavior to children. So that's something, if you're trying to teach them emotion regulation, it can be a harder thing to do if the parent is not modeling that emotion regulation. Punishment isn't as constructive as other things. So if you think about like sitting down and talking about what is the problem, what happened, helping coach through, so emotion coaching parent, that kind of thing is a lot more constructive than just doing a punishment. So you can think of a punishment as something physical, like say a spank, for example, or something verbal. So with that, it's not uncommon for a parent to become so angry that they unintentionally actually go from punishment into abuse. So becoming unintentionally abusive to a child with the intention of punishing. So that's another risk factor as well. And that's definitely something that we would want to avoid. In general, punishments, like what it says here, instill fear, rage, or avoidance of parent. They don't necessarily teach destructive messages can and do. So some better recommendations rather than, oh, my microphone keeps dropping in and out. I was getting notifications that my internet signal was dropping in and out. But I'll plug the microphone in and out right now. All right, are you able to hear me now? Is it cutting in and out? Sorry, I guess I should have. Thank you, Daniela. I should have probably asked one question at a time there. Is my microphone working? And then after that, is it cutting in and out? So thank you. Let me know if it starts doing that again. I think that was just my internet signal being choppy for a moment. But thank you for letting me know. So some better recommendations rather than punishment are taking a timeout to calm down. Depending on the researcher, they might say a timeout. It does qualify as a punishment. But yeah, that's one of those things that you might find in looking at research. Timeout itself might be qualified as a punishment. But timeout can offer a time for a child to calm down, for a parent to calm down, and then being able to talk about things. Other alternative punishments are taking away privileges for a time. So say no Minecraft for 2 days, or if kids are fighting with swords, taking those away. I remember a punishment I got one time was, I think I was 7 and my brother was 5. We had bows, like actual practice training bows and training arrows. So we took them outside and we were shooting the arrows straight up into the air and trying to catch them on the way down. Not the best or safest idea that I've ever had in my life. And so our punishment was that those bows were taken away, and I literally never saw them again in my entire life. So it stuck with me, obviously. And I didn't do that again because I didn't have a bow to shoot an arrow in the head or in the air and almost hit ourselves in the head with. So that's another example with something that's a little more positive than, say, a physical punishment. And a best thing to do is talk to the child about the behavior, whatever the kind of punishment is. If it's timeout to calm down, if it's taking away Minecraft for a couple days, talking about their behavior, trying to find alternatives to their behavior. So if they're mad and yelling at their sibling, if they're mad and yelling at you, waiting till you're calmed down and talking about, well, what is the actual thing that's the problem here? What's going on? What can we do to transfer that energy into something more positive or figure out how to solve the problem? And that can be hard, especially as, say, a parent or a caregiver in the moment, if you're upset, if they're upset as well. So that's a kind of situation that's a high risk factor for leading to even abuse of a child. So trying to do these and making those a habit is really helpful. And this can be challenging, especially because a lot of our punishment parenting styles come from what we experienced and what we saw from our own parents. So it does often take, for most people, a conscious effort to choose a new course of action and do that new course of action, because essentially your brain's default network has learned from observation what you saw earlier in life, which doesn't mean it's impossible to change, but it does mean it takes effort. But it is one of those things that is plastic in the sense that the kinds of reactions you do have to children's behavior or others' behavior, you can train yourself to respond differently. All right, so co-parenting is when parents are giving each other support when raising a child. Oftentimes we talk about co-parenting in the sense of divorced parents, but co-parenting is also a relevant aspect of parents who aren't divorced as well. So coordinating, cooperating, help children develop optimally. Getting different messages from different parents can be more difficult, especially in early childhood. So therapy can be helpful for the parents if they're having a hard time co-parenting and coming to decisions and cooperating and coordinating. Therapy can be good to help work on that. So another aspect, I thought we talked about abuse now rather than this topic. Well, I guess we'll get to that later. Or maybe I accidentally moved the slides around. Sorry about that. But since we're here, let's talk about this. So a context that has a lot of research in it right now. And if it's something that you're interested in, it might be a good question paper. It's also an area of research that has a lot of funding to it. So there's a lot more research emerging about LGBTQ plus parents and what the children's outcomes look like. So with this, about 20% of same-sex couples do have children or are raising children. Most often, so of the 20%, a large proportion of those people who have children, these are children that came from previous relationships most often. So like, I forget the number, I didn't put it in the slides. I think it's like 60-something%. The big key point that I want to make here is that there's essentially no difference in the children's development compared to heterosexual parents. So essentially no difference in mental illness probability, like higher or lower likelihood for mental illness, no popularity differences in like middle school or high school, like no higher or lower. School performance is still in the same range as children of heterosexual parents. Physical health, and there's also no increased or decreased probability of LGBTQ plus identification for those children. So even having two parents who are same gender doesn't lead the child to be more likely to also be in a same-sex relationship later. So there is essentially, I mean, that's basically the big key here, essentially no difference, which is something, a positive finding, especially when these groups and these children have traditionally and in the past been targets and what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me after we've moved on past this topic. So with this, some differences in the parenting style of same gender couples are they tend to be more egalitarian, so sharing more responsibilities than a traditional relationship with a male-female. There tends to be more egalitarian parenting in these more shared responsibilities around the house or work. Tends to be more positive parenting, and then fewer child externalizing problems. So for the child, that's about the only difference that we see over a long period of time. On average, the same popularity, school performance, things like IQ, LGBTQ plus identification, those are all within the same range as children of heterosexual parents. Children of same-sex parents tend to have fewer externalizing problems. So things like vandalism or something that you would say as a society member outside that child, like looking at their behavior, that's generally what an externalizing problem is. It's a big category. So if you're interested in this topic, if you want to have more resources, here's a couple places to start. There's a video there, as well as a paper that you could start with if this was a topic that interested you for a question paper. Again, if any of these topics that we cover at all through the course are interesting to you, let me know, and I might have more resources like this to share with you as well. So yeah, I think I just mixed up the slides. I must have just accidentally dragged these around. So kind of a funny jump to talk about that in the middle. I wonder if I have other slides later on too on that topic. So let's talk about child maltreatment, one of the least fun topics. So physical abuse is defined as a physical injury from punching, biting, burning. With this, the parent or caregiver might not be intending to hurt the child, so it might be in a situation where they're trying to punish or doing a spank, but because of anger levels or because the child is so small, this is actually a really common thing for children who are still in diapers. A parent who is trying to spank the child in diapers will often hit harder because they know a diaper is there, and there's even been cases of dislocated hips and things like that. I know, not a fun topic to talk about, but it is relevant to early child human development, which is why we're talking about it. So, yeah, child neglect is the failure to provide for the basic needs of a child. This includes physical, emotional, or educational needs. So it's actually the most common maltreatment. It happens about 3 times more or it's 3 times more likely to be happening than physical abuse. So we often talk about child maltreatment from the sense of physical abuse, but actually neglect tends to be more common and maybe not as obvious to people as well. Sexual abuse, fondling of genitals, intercourse, incest, rape, sodomy, exhibitionism, or also photography, prostitution, pornographic material of children, also included in sexual abuse. Emotional abuse includes acts or omissions by parents or caregivers that cause or could cause. So again, this can be something that could be unintentional, that could cause serious behavioral, cognitive, or emotional problems. So again, some of these are obviously clearly intentional, but when we're talking about things like neglect, it might not necessarily be intentional, but it could still be child maltreatment, child abuse. Physical abuse, again, it might come from excessive physical punishment. Emotional abuse, it might not be intended to be abusive to a child, but it might be causing, the behaviors of the parents might be causing extreme emotional or cognitive problems. So with that being said, the consequences of abuse are, it's a huge risk factor for a lot of things. So poor or negative attachment, so insecure avoidant, insecure, a lot of the, basically all the insecures, as well as what is the one that we talk about that we don't really focus on? Disorganized attachment. That's common as well. Poor emotion regulation, which you might be able to see that example if they don't have a caregiver, that they're getting a good model of emotion regulation. If they're being emotionally abused, they're not being able to learn how to emotionally regulate. Peer relationship troubles. So especially in early childhood, that family context is some of the most important contexts that you're involved in. And so if you're not learning emotional relationship skills with your parents or siblings or people in that family context, it can be harder to generalize those to peers as well. So higher likelihood of risk-taking behaviors, including risky sexual behaviors. So with this, what are some supports? What can we do? Well, one thing is be aware that this is a problem. Be aware of these different kinds of abuse. So if it's a family member or a friend or something like that, so we can give supports to them. But one thing that's found to be very helpful, and also I think a positive, when in all this negative, this positive stat I think is really useful. So 75% of abused parents don't abuse their own children. So that means like of the children who were abused as children, now they are parents, 75% of those don't then abuse their own children. So we often talk about in like the media that it's a cycle or something like that. In reality, it can be for about 25% of those people, but many of these parents who were abused as children do not default to that. They aren't abusive to their own children. So I think that's a really positive thing, especially in such a negative or hard topic to focus on. So home visits for new parents is also really, really helpful. So this is one thing that can help in a lot of ways for the socio-emotional development of the parent who is now a new parent. Having nurses and therapists come for at-home visits to teach things like emotion regulation, home management strategies. For example, there's programs that come in to help teach like, well, how can you schedule and make your house safe and be able to get things done like washing the dishes, as well as getting the diaper changed, as well as getting the feeding, as well as getting sleep. So there are programs that have done this. They're not accessible everywhere in the US. And also some of the programs are basically, if they are at a cost, not all insurances provide coverage for those kinds of things. So it can't be accessed by everyone, which is a hard thing. But that is actually one of the things that we found to be the most effective. So to have direct in-home care come and train and help build skills of the parents as they're also helping with just even general daily tasks. So with this, psychotherapy, family and individual can be helpful as well. So therapy for the child, therapy for the parent, family therapy. And the earlier any kind of abuse is stopped, the better, essentially. So giving a child the chance for good emotion regulation learning, good relationships or attachments with parents, those kinds of things. So this also leads to our topic that we discussed in memory about asking questions of children with potential abuse. So I'm not going to dive into these resources again, but here they are again. If it seems like something that you might be in need of in the future, you have them here. You can come and link to them or copy them into like a bookmark in your web browser. So someday if you ever needed them, you had them. So asking open-ended questions is some of the biggest things rather than asking directed questions, closed-end questions. Open-ended questions are good. All right, so definitely one of my least favorite topics to talk about in literally the entire class, but an important one for childhood development as well. So let's talk about the family context in the sense of siblings. Talk a little bit about divorce, and we'll talk about play and other socio-emotional development of children. So about 80% of children have a sibling. A 2-year-old and a 4-year-old tend to have, like if you have a 2-year-old child and a 4-year-old child, they will tend on average to have a conflict about every 10 minutes. And so this might be a little thing like one person is playing and used a different word for a character and the other child yells at them. Or this could be all the way up to like a fight between the kids where they're actually like tackling each other. So it's a whole range, but on average, there's a conflict about every 10 minutes for those age groups. So that declines as they're aging up. So if you have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, you should expect it to be a little longer than that, not 10 minutes on average. So one of the things to do as an emotion coaching parent is to help them initiate play, help them learn to accept that disappointment when others don't want to play with them, and how to deal with any kind of anger or disappointment. So we can do that again, like I mentioned, how we would work on that with kids in a therapeutic setting, like literally sit down, play a game, and make them angry by cheating. You could do it that way, and that would be acceptable in that kind of context where you're training and giving them support and the warmth still. But this is best like as things happen. So the other day, my daughter wanted to read rather than play with her brother, and he was disappointed about that. So helping coach him through those emotions is a good thing to do in that kind of situation as it occurs, rather than trying to make that occur. So siblings are a big support for each other. They help give another opportunity to teach each other, to compromise, to practice peer relationships, to communicate, to see emotion regulation or a lack of emotion regulation sometimes, and support each other as well. So our cat was feeling sick, or it looked like it might have been sick. So one of the children was really sad, and so the other child came over and gave their sibling a hug, that kind of thing, so they can support each other. And those kinds of, the utility of sibling relationships is similar even into adulthood as well. So with that, do parents favor one child over another? Don't go forward in the slides to see the answer. I think this was in your book as well, though, so you might remember it. So just in the meeting chat, let's get a vote. Do you think that parents have a favorite, or do most parents not have a favorite? All right, I see one vote. Let's get some more votes. All right. All right, so we've got some yeses and then yes question mark. So think that probably they have a favorite, and I just dropped my cough drop. So do parents favor one child over another? On average, yes, most parents do tend to have a favorite. We do have a vote for no. Some kids are better in some situations than others. So maybe in certain situations, Brooke, for that one, are you saying that in some situations a parent might prefer one child versus another?
Yeah, like I have 3 siblings, and then me makes 4, and my mom when we were growing up, I was always the one to go grocery shopping with her and to cook food with her. But if she took any of the other kids, it was like an absolute nightmare. And just like if she were to take me to go clothes shopping, I'd like scream and kick and not want to do it and stuff. So I mean, when it comes down to like going for a long car ride, she'd want me to be there because we're able to talk and like have fun. But if she's going to like, I don't know, go see a movie, she'd take another kid.
Mm-hmm.
But she loves us all equally. But like, it's, I don't know.
Yeah, depending on the context, there might be a favorite for that specific context. Interesting. I think that this isn't an area of research that I have studied up to that point, but I'm sure there is research on, do these overall favorites, are they overall in general? Because the studies that I've looked at have been asking parents, do they have a favorite? Basically like a survey response, or asking them in a home visit, like which child is your favorite, and seeing how many parents do have a favorite versus do not. So that's really interesting. I would actually like to see some research on even for parents who say that they do have a favorite, is that consistent across the majority of contexts that they are in life, like shopping, or going to a movie, or going out clothes shopping or something like that, or on a hike. Does that favorite stay consistent overall, or is their favorite actually their favorite in some of their most favorite activities? So if a parent likes hiking the most, is their favorite the child that they would like most for that? So really interesting question that would be a question paper I would do. Who knows, maybe I actually will look into that one a little bit. I probably won't actually write the paper for everybody, but I think I'll look up that research. So really good answers there. So for that simpler, just overall, about 65% of mothers do say that they have a favorite, and about 70% of fathers also say they have a favorite. So with that being said, for the child specifically in early childhood, there's only been one class that I haven't ever gotten that question of, do I have a favorite? Yes, I do have a favorite. So the older sibling is my favorite, but the younger sibling is my wife's favorite. So I hope that balances out some of these risk factors for the non-favorite child. Because if you're the non-favorite child, it is correlated to lower self-esteem and sadness. That also can cause conflict between the siblings, knowing that one is the favorite. So let's say there's three siblings. Let's say there's these three siblings. Let's say this one is Sarah in this example. These two siblings are going to, over time, be picking up that Sarah gets the first slice of cake or gets the best things. And so that can cause conflict between the favorite and non-favorites. So, yep, I do have a favorite, and my wife has a favorite, and they're the opposite children. So probably good that we're just keeping the two. So there's no non-favorite child in the house. But yep, I definitely do. I'm part of that 70%, and my wife's part of that 65%. All right, so with that being said, the emotional quality of the relationship and these importances of sibling relationships, they extend into adulthood as well. Yeah, when you're not the favorite, it does suck for sure. And children pick up on it as well. So if you know you have a favorite and you're aware of that as a parent or as a caregiver, intentionally trying not to play favorites is important. So yeah, it can be a difficult thing for a child, because even at this age in early childhood, a child will start to be able to understand that in this social setting, my status on this hierarchy of the family is lower than this other child's, rather than understanding that they're loved equally and on the same level playing field. With this, so in child friendships as well as adult I guess, spoiler alert, some of the similarities between siblings and the things that they get from a sibling relationship are also later on things that we get from close friendships as well. So the emotional quality of the relationship is important, especially in early childhood. Siblings often express their intense emotions to one another, even more commonly than to the parents or other caregivers or other family members, both positive and negative emotions. So probably the angriest my children have ever been is probably to each other, as well as some of the most positive interactions I've ever seen of them are probably between each other. So with this, most siblings do have mixed feelings about their sibling. Like they might love them, but hate that they make tapping noises or something like that. Or be really proud of them for doing this, but really frustrated because of this. So that's really common to have these kinds of mixed feelings about siblings, to not, even if it's an overall really positive relationship, to still have aspects of it that they don't feel are positive. And that's perfectly normal, acceptable to have that kind of thing. So with this, the familiarity and intimacy of the relationship, they usually know each other very, very well. So that means they can really easily support each other, but it also means that it makes it really easy for them to tease each other. So when we're talking about intimacy here, we're talking about sharing intimate details. So intimacy in most definitions within psychology means like the sharing of things that are personal or important to you. So if you're intimate with your close friend, what we're saying there is that you're sharing a lot about yourself with them. They're sharing a lot about themselves with you. So with that, siblings tend to know each other really well, and it makes it really easy to support a sibling because you'll be able to know that they're having this kind of challenge or struggle. But it also, especially in childhood, makes it them a really easy target for specific kinds of teasing. So my children have already picked up on what are the buttons that they can push to each other to make them annoyed. Yeah, and it doesn't go away when you grow up. Yeah, for my brother and I, we're 2 years apart, and this was definitely the case all growing up. Now that we live a couple thousand miles away from each other, we don't do the annoying each other thing as much, but it definitely comes back when we're in each other's presence, like when I go to visit him at his house, or he comes to visit my family at mine, or something like that. So, but this can also, especially in later adulthood and adolescence, you can get friendships that fill some of these same roles as well. All right, we've got a comment as well from Daniela. Go for it.
I was just gonna say, my brother, like I'm 38 now, and my brother's like 33, and like my twins my age, and I have a 37-year-old sister too. And every time my brother comes over or he sees us, he knows like what to do with each of us. With me, I don't know why he chose like to be tickling my armpit, because I'm not ticklish, but like I hate people like touching me. So he always comes and goes to my armpit and like keep touching my armpit. It annoys me so much. And I remember like one time I was asking for help to write a paper, and he was like, "Oh, I'll do it for you." But like, the only thing I ask for is to be like unlimited. I can like unlimited touch your armpit for the rest of your life. And I was like, no, there's no way. So I wrote the paper. But until this day, like he sees us and he knows what to do with which one of us. And now they have, like, my sisters have kids, they already know what to do with each of the kids too, to be like annoying them like all the time. But he think it's funny, so.
Yeah, that's a really clear example and concrete for this exact kind of fact that we're talking about here. So thank you for that example. Yeah, a lot of these examples are really relevant and illustrative of these findings that we have. So hopefully in your own listening to these examples, so Daniela, for example, gave a couple examples last class period as well as this class period. So with that, if you can think of your own examples in your own life or your own siblings or things like that, writing that down in your notes will really help connect this material to your own lived experience and help you remember it just so much better. If you can't think of your own examples, hearing the examples in class or the ones that sound click with you well, writing those down in your notes is good too. But that's one really big thing with like taking notes, is making it personal to you. So writing that example down would be great. So thank you for those examples. All right, well, I'm glad we've had so much back and forth on both the parenting styles as well as a lot of these topics today. We're definitely not going to finish up with this chapter by the end of class, but I think we can finish with this section. So with this, when there are more siblings, so like 3 or 4 or more than that, there tends to be preferences between siblings. So a sibling that they like more than others, a sibling that is sibling 3's favorite or something like that. Some of these sibling relationships might be described as warm and affectionate. Some might be described as irritating or mean. So when talking about the sibling that tries to touch your armpit a lot, that might, your overall description might be that they are an irritating sibling or something like that. This is not uncommon with having multiple siblings to have some that are a favorite versus not a favorite. So with that being said, birth order, this is a funny thing. My sister, when she was in undergrad, she went into education, early childhood education. So she learned a little bit about psychology through that. And one of the teachers had them do a paper on birth order. And I thought it was kind of funny because birth order is a really poor predictor of behavior. So if any effects exist, they are really, really small. So when we talk about how big the effect is, if on average, one kind of I'm making up a stat here. So if the firstborn tends to have higher grades, what we mean by that would be that the effect is really small, that on average, you might see a difference of like the second child gets like 85% versus the first child gets like 87% on average. So the effects of all of these findings are really, really tiny. So the firstborn does have slightly higher IQ on average. The later born children tend to be more agreeable. Again, these are really tiny differences, not that big or predictable. So if you're dating someone and you know they're the first child, you wouldn't be able to say, oh, they have the highest IQ of all their siblings. Because this is on average again. Some children are not going to fit this. Some are going to have a big difference. But most are going to have essentially no difference that you could see, unless you're getting a big pool of like first, second, third borns and doing a study like this. Only children do tend to be a little more achievement oriented than children with siblings. So saying all firstborn children are this way or that way is definitely an oversimplification. There are many, many contexts that affect development beyond just the birth order. So it's essentially it's a predictor variable that has never been relevant in any of my work enough to even give it any thought or care. So there's birth order for you. Sorry if that is something different than what you've heard before. If so, maybe write a question paper. Show me some good research articles that talk about a few areas where there is a large effect size from birth order for a couple things. That would be really interesting for me to read. I would actually really like that. So next time we'll start with this family systems, and we'll talk about working parents, we'll talk about divorced parents, and we'll probably go through it pretty quickly so we can jump into chapter 7. There's only a couple more topics for chapter 6, but these are pretty relevant in day-to-day life. So thank you for all your participation today in that activity, as well as back and forth in commenting and giving examples during class. I really appreciated it. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day and a good weekend this weekend, and you can even maybe play in the snow or something. All right, have a good day.